I'm going to begin today with a short quote from a news story that ran on my birthday. It said, "The large-scale burning of oil, coal, and other fossil fuels could melt polar ice and raise ocean levels by over 20 feet in several decades. Even a 15-foot rise would flood coastal areas of the United States occupied by 11 million people." I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume you think that I am quoting from a story published in 2018, on my birthday last year, when the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released its so-called Doomsday Report. But this Doomsday Report came out the day that this photo was taken, on my first birthday in 1981. You see, this crisis isn't new. It's just that now it is an emergency, and we're running out of time. People are drowning and dying in the storms in Puerto Rico, in Houston, in New York, in North Carolina. Entire towns and villages are sliding into the sea in Alaska and in the bayous of Louisiana. Americans are being burned alive in their own backyards from the wildfires, as in Paradise last year. This is all happening because, as one climate scientist put it, in 2016, warming went nonlinear. That means not only is the heating getting more intense, but the consequences are becoming more unpredictable and catastrophic as we careen towards irreversible climate tipping points that threaten the survival of all of humanity. The complete collapse of polar ice, the complete collapse of insect life. Bread baskets turn to deserts, oceans turn to acid. If what I'm telling you right now is making you feel afraid, that is a reasonable response. If you are feeling grief and sorrow, that is a human response. And if you are feeling panic, those are your survival instincts. They are intact, they are kicking in. And you're going to need to channel them into action in the next 10 years. Because our generation didn't create this crisis, but we are the ones who must solve it. And I'm here to tell you that we still can, and I'm here to tell you how to do it. And I'm here to tell you we have a precious decade to get this done. So first, I want you to know that this is my daughter on her first birthday. We're on track for emissions to hit 1.5 degrees centigrade, the uppermost safe limit described by scientists, before she turns 10 years old. I want you to consider our atmosphere as a toxic waste dump for about 90 companies, just 90. It's fewer than the number of people in this room right now. They are called the carbon majors, and they have contributed most of the pollution that has already heated the planet by 1.1 degree. We need to stop the warming at 1.5. That means the dump is almost full. But there is nothing, and there is no one stopping the dumping. The United States is now the world's largest producer of oil and gas, set to grow extraction 15-fold by 2030, precisely the time period we have to go in diametrically the opposite direction. It is not hyperbole to call this policy cataclysmic. This is Miami at 2 degrees, what many analysts now call a best-case scenario. This is Miami at 4 degrees. At 4 degrees, experts tell us that the costs globally could total over $600 trillion, more than double all of the wealth that exists in the world today. That is why we must invest in a Green New Deal, a comprehensive policy to stabilize warming at 1.5 degrees. And this is the vision being discussed in Congress right now, led by Representative Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Ed Markey. The Green New Deal is more than a climate policy. It is a pledge that no matter where you live, where you work, how much money you make, what color your skin is, what language you speak, you will have clean water to drink, clean air to breathe, and that the right to a stable climate system capable of sustaining future generations is the right of every American. We can do this. In the 1930s, the United States was locked in the Great Depression. Half of all of the banks had failed several times. 1 in 4 Americans was out of work. These are Dust Bowl refugees in Bakersfield, California in 1935, and the charred remains of a school bus in Paradise in 2018. Then, like now, it was do or die. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected on a platform to do the impossible, to rescue our country from a death spiral with a slate of policies called the New Deal. In his first 100 days in office, he reined in Wall Street and created jobs for millions of Americans, jobs like building the Golden Gate Bridge. The Green New Deal decade brought us benefits that we still have today: infrastructure, electricity, the minimum wage, Social Security, the right to collective bargaining. These were structural changes. So when we say we need a Green New Deal, we need structural change in the next 10 years, and we're told, well, that's impossible. But so was the old New Deal. FDR and the Congress he worked with, they didn't have a choice, and neither do we. A recent study from MIT tells us that renewable energies, which are growing faster than ever, but at the current rate, they won't catch up with fossil fuels for 400 years. We just don't have that kind of time. That is why we can't just leave it to the market to sort this out. That is why government has a critical and essential role to play in stabilizing our climate and protecting all Americans and all future generations from the threat of catastrophic climate change. There are at least 3 things that I believe any Green New Deal must accomplish at a minimum. Number 1, rapid reductions in greenhouse gas pollution. That's the obvious one. Number 2, a phase out of fossil fuel extraction and a just transition for the workers and communities who rely on fossil fuels today. And number 3, we need to clean up our atmosphere and cool the planet. So here's how we're going to do it. This is a passive building. It uses close to 0 carbon energy. This is a solar array on the Navajo Nation in Arizona. This is a wind farm in Texas. This is a wave energy buoy off the Oregon coast. This is a plug-in semi-truck in Los Angeles. This is an electric double-decker bus in London. This is a solar-powered vehicle charging station in Nevada. All of these technologies exist now. They exist today. And polls say that 87% of Americans want access to them now. How about a Green New Deal with a Cash for Clunkers program that gets internal combustion engines off the road by 2030? How about universal, zero emissions public transportation in every city in America? This is the world's first hydrogen-powered passenger train. It launched in Germany last year. When the Clean Air Act was passed, the catalytic converter did not yet exist. But Congress imposed deadlines against the fierce objections of the automakers. And the catalytic converter became standard issue on every car sold in the United States within 18 months. That is the power of technology forcing, and that is the policy that we must pursue to move this transition forward with the scale and at the speed that is required in this climate emergency. How about a nationwide rail network on hydrogen fuel that moves Americans where we need to go at 100 miles an hour silently and emits nothing but water? Don't be led to believe that that is impossible or it will take 100 years to do. The first transcontinental railroad was built in 6 years by hand, in brutal and sometimes deadly conditions for the immigrants and the enslaved African Americans who built our nation's railroads on stolen native land. Let's get this right this time. A Green New Deal that invests in the families and the communities on the front lines of this climate crisis who have been historically excluded, overpolluted, disenfranchised, overpoliced, and undervalued. We can provide a good, family-sustaining union job to every American who wants to be part of rebuilding our nation beyond fossil fuels, because we have a lot of work to do. But the second thing that any Green New Deal must recognize is that in order to build that world beyond fossil fuels, we need to set a rapid and realistic time frame to stop pumping them out of the ground. And the workers in the extractive industries shouldn't pay the price for that. They need and deserve a just transition, and the polluters need to pay for it. Because our sky is now a Superfund site. Polluters pay into a Superfund to finance the cleanup of their toxic waste. And now, those 90 companies, those carbon majors, they need to pay to clean up the toxic waste site that is in our atmosphere. Because while they have made trillions of dollars on a dangerous product that is threatening the survival of life on Earth, they have yet to pay a dime for the climate that they have destabilized. And the Green New Deal must collect on that debt. So payouts from the carbon majors can finance a sky cleanup, but there is no giant carbon vacuum cleaner. That's where nature comes in. Plants and their root systems can pull the excess carbon out of the atmosphere, back underground, into our soil. That's why the third thing that any Green New Deal must do is reforest our landscapes, restore our wetlands, just as the old New Deal paid farmers to plant soil-building crops. We can support our farmers, our ranchers, our tribal rural communities to invest in regenerative agriculture and soil-building strategies and bringing compost to every community. And we can all be part of this, with our kitchen scraps becoming the black gold of the future, a layer of topsoil that can carpet our continent and cool our climate. At this late stage, all three of these strategies are required. Working alone, none of them will work. It won't be enough. We need all of it, and it's going to take all of us. teachers and firefighters and doctors and bus drivers and welders and machinists and electricians and builders and technologists and all of the caregivers who do all of the caregiving work to make that labor possible, all working people across America coming together around this vision. When steam power was invented, the inventors made engines shaped like horses because this was their understanding of the world. Today, our vision is only limited by the fossil fuel world that we know. But the world beyond fossil fuels, it's right there. It's right in front of us. We're looking right at it, and we can build it. We can create it. We can do this together. In 1962, going to the moon seemed impossible. But President Kennedy stood before the nation and said, "We shall send to the moon a giant rocket made of new metal alloys, some of which have not yet been invented. And we will pay what needs to be paid, and it will be done before the end of the decade." And it was. And so it must be again. This is our moonshot. But it's not for the moon. It's for the earth, and we only get one shot. The 2020s will be the decade that defines us, that defines the possibilities for all future generations. This is a photo of my grandmother and me with my then newborn cousin. My grandmother was a nurse cadet during World War II. And a member of the greatest generation. I dream that in 2050, we will have stabilized our climate. And on my 70th birthday, my children, who will then be 35 and 37, will come to visit me, and maybe they'll bring young children with them. And I will tell them about the greatest decade that this country ever knew. Back in the 2020s, when all of this began, when the world was on the edge of ecological breakdown, when we were afraid that it might be too late, when people told us that the structural changes that were required were impossible. But we came together with a vision, and we worked together with a plan, and we made their future possible. Thank you.